I nearly always get my inspiration by going on travelling trips where, if I'm lucky, I'm with a friend and go to a place and draw. So I go to India and I've done drawings. I've been to Morocco. Just love travelling. This year I went to the Galapagos. Sometimes it might only be that I draw and I never see whether I'll get the inspiration from it, but it sort of filters in. I have a rule that when I travel and I'm away from my regular surroundings of work, that I have to do a drawing a day. Even if I'm in an uninspirational place, I have to see something that I'm going to draw. Now, it needn't always be a textile or it needn't always be an idea for a dress, but it has to be a drawing. It could be a drawing of an animal, but that might just lead to a diagonal way into a new design. Most of my inspiration comes because of my drawing background. And I think it's sad that people now might, because of computers, not draw. I mean, the whole thing is to go out and experience looking at something and drawing it. To take a photograph, too easy. You have to sit there for that embarrassment. You know, if you go to do a drawing and people walk past you and look over your shoulder and go, and it's so awful. But you get used to it. And when you've achieved the drawing, after all those problems, it's so wonderful to look back on a trip and do a drawing every day, and it might only be the handle of a door or a stuffed crocodile sticking out of a wall in India. And if you took a photograph, it wouldn't mean anything. But if you draw it, it goes into your brain and filters out as something else. I did the sets and costumes for the Pearl Fishers Opera in San Diego. And this is one of the sets with the magical palm trees. And back here, this is the high priest in the Pearl Fishers. And here we used one of my prints that we printed here. And then he's got a brocade robe. And they're all sort of vaguely Sri Lanka, Indian. Oh, and then here underneath are reference sheets of series of silk scarves that I did that were printed in Italy. And we're now doing a revamp on these. These were done over a period of maybe 10 years. So you've got lots of different sort of scarves. There's one that I think you might like to see. Oh, here. These ones with all the flowers. And this is the actual scarf in a different colourway with magical daisies and flowers. I began to be sure that I wanted to be a designer when I went to my first art college. I thought I'd do book illustration and I'd teach, and then I was influenced by this fantastic teacher, Barbara Brown, who was a freelance textile designer, and she really introduced me to the world of textile design. And I suppose really I'd always been drawing and painting and doing everything like that. And so I naturally then drifted into being a textile designer, which I love. I love the fact that textiles create the shape of the garment and do wonderful things. Because of the influence of Barbara Brown, she said, well, the only place you should go if you want to do textiles is to go to the Royal College of Art. So I applied to the Royal College of Art, and there was fierce competition at that time. And then I thought that I'd be designing furnishing fabrics and everything like that. And in my second year, I fell in love with the way things could go onto garments. And I got involved in the dress show. And in fact, Ozzie Clark was at the Royal College at that time, and he used some of my textiles. But every time someone else used my textiles, I always thought, I think it could look better than that. I think it's not the best use of the fabric. So I then, from then on, started to think about how the garments could look and the print could create the shape of the garment.
This is the Textile Bible for the print room, which has a record of every print that Zandra's ever done. And today we are printing Tutankhamun's leopard, which is on page 92, and it shows us a record of the print in the turnaround.
It won't matter on this, but it would be better with 45 because it might miss on those bits otherwise for you.
Yeah.
Right, you go by. We're printing two Tutankhamun's leopard that I designed in 1986 after a trip to Egypt. I used it for Aida at the English National Opera last year, and we love it so much that we're using it for our collection again, some 20 years later. And it's a 3-colour print, and they're printing the 3rd colour now. It's being printed for pattern paper so that we can lay out our chiffon on top of it and cut around it to make the designs. When we're designing, as I said, we're working mainly with sheer fabric, and we're able to lay the sheer fabric on top. This is really a piece of very cheap nylon, and you can lay it on top of the print exactly, and then we can do marks where we have to cut it out, and what we have to do by fitting it exactly onto the print and knowing where we can cut it out. And this is done first, we try this out on the stand, and later it's going to be printed onto this fine leather, and then probably we'll fringe it. I left the Royal College of Art in 1963 and found that I couldn't sell my textile designs freelance. So I got someone sympathetic to show me how patterns worked and put a collection together. And I've met these fantastic American models who did photographs of my clothes with David Bailey. And they said, "You've got to go to America to make your fortune." And I'd never been to America, but something made me think to myself, that's what I've got to do. So I put the collection together, got two names to contact, the head of American Vogue and the head of Women's Wear Daily, and I went over with my collection and they both featured them. And from then on I went back and did the designs, and no one backed me, but I gradually kept doing my work until I was totally absorbed with doing printed textiles into wonderful dresses. This is the room where every single Zandra Rhodes is cut and made. This is the cutting table where we lay the printed paper down that we printed downstairs. This particular print is the one that you can see on the stand, and it's the one that Yolanta is now making. As you can see, we use every space that you can see, and at the moment Ben's working on this while no one else is on the table to create this dress made out of all lovely Chinese circles. Looks good.
Yeah.
Looks pretty.
Yeah, I think it looks very pretty.
I'd saved some 60 odd chests of my clothes, and I also used to refer to them for when I was working with them. So I decided that rather than donate them to a museum, that it would be better to found a museum that was only for British clothing and British designers, especially with a leaning towards textiles. That the idea began to feed in my head to put together a museum. My friend Andrew Logan round the corner here saw this building and he said, "Zandra, there's a building I think you should see. You've always wanted to do a museum of your work." I persuaded the top architect of Mexico, Ricardo Legarreta, to design it. The motivation was to exhibit my work, but also the work of other British designers. None of them get the recognition for the influence that they've had worldwide. And the idea long term was to make sure that there was a home for them all to go to. And additionally, if we ever got the grant money, to be able to give textiles the credibility and the acknowledgement that it needs. I've never really been offered a job, so I've always had to create my jobs. Except for when I went for teaching jobs, I've really had to create the job and make the space for the things that I do. I find myself totally bogged down with horrible bookwork, which I sort of have to get through at odd hours, and I think it takes away from designing. But I always say to young designers, just don't give up. I just find my work leads me along and I don't really know where it's leading me. And sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down, but you don't admit it goes down. You just tackle it all with the same enthusiasm and in the end it goes right.